Picture this. You're walking down a busy city street on a crisp morning, the kind where the air bites at your cheeks and the sound of honking cars mixes with the chatter of pedestrians. The sidewalk is a sea of faces, people rushing to work, students with backpacks slung over their shoulders, a street vendor calling out to sell hot coffee. You're on your way to meet a friend, your mind already buzzing with the day ahead, when you notice a man sitting on the corner, his clothes tattered, a cardboard sign in front of him that reads, "Please help." His eyes are downcast, his hands trembling from the cold, and there's a small cup with a few coins scattered inside. You slow your pace, and in that split second, a thought flashes through your mind. He's probably just going to spend it on drugs. You catch yourself. Where did that come from? You don't know this man. You don't know his story, but you judged him anyway. You keep walking, but the thought lingers, and as you move through the crowd, you start to notice it everywhere. A woman in a flashy designer coat cuts in front of you, and you think, she's so entitled. A teenager on a skateboard nearly bumps into you, and you mutter to yourself, kids these days have no respect. By the time you reach the cafe, where your friend is waiting, you're replaying these moments in your head, and a question hits you like a wave. Why can't I stop judging people? Why does my mind leap to these conclusions, these labels, these snap decisions about who someone is, what they're worth, what they deserve? Can I even live a single day, a single hour, without judging anyone? Now imagine a different scene. You're sitting at a family gathering, the table piled high with food, the room filled with the warmth of laughter and conversation. Your cousin is telling a story about her new job, her voice brimming with excitement, but you're only half listening. Instead, you're watching your uncle across the table, the one who always shows up late, the one who never seems to have his life together. He's laughing too loudly, interrupting your cousin to make a joke that falls flat, and you feel a familiar irritation rising in your chest. He's so immature, you think. He's never going to change. But then your cousin turns to you, her eyes bright, and asks what you think about her new role. You smile, you nod, you say something encouraging, but deep down you're thinking, she's too naive. She'll never make it in that cutthroat industry. The words don't leave your mouth, but the judgment is there, sharp and unyielding, coloring the way you see her, the way you hear her, the way you connect with her. You leave the gathering feeling uneasy, replaying these thoughts, and the question hits you again. Why do I do this? Why can't I stop judging the people I love, the people I don't even know, the people I pass on the street? What if I tried to live a day, a single day, without judging anyone? Could I do it? Could you? Let's take a step back and think about the last time you judged someone. Maybe it was this morning when you saw a coworker show up late to a meeting and you thought, they're so irresponsible. Maybe it was yesterday when you scrolled through social media and saw a friend's post about their latest vacation and you thought, they're just showing off. They're so shallow. Maybe it was 5 minutes ago when you caught yourself judging the way someone looked, the way they spoke, the way they lived their life. We all do it. Judging is as natural as breathing, as automatic as blinking. But what if it's not just a habit? What if it's a prison, a cage we built around ourselves, one that shapes how we see the world, how we connect with others, how we understand ourselves? How many times have you judged someone without even realizing it, without stopping to question why? How many times have those judgments shaped your actions, your words, your relationships, without you even noticing? What if the act of judging isn't just a fleeting thought, but a force that's been controlling your life, dictating how you move through the world, how you love, how you live? Maybe you're thinking right now, I don't want to judge people. I want to be open, to be compassionate, to see the best in others. But what if judging isn't something you can just turn off? What if it's so deeply ingrained in you, in all of us, that it's become a part of who you are? What if the harder you try to stop, the more you realize how trapped you are? To understand why we can't stop judging, we need to look deeper, not just at the judgments themselves, but at the forces that drive them, the roots that run through our minds, our culture, our very nature as human beings. Let's start with Friedrich Nietzsche, a philosopher who challenged the very foundations of how we think about morality. Nietzsche argued that our concepts of good and evil, right and wrong, are not universal truths but human constructs, created to impose order on a chaotic world. In his book Beyond Good and Evil, he writes, "There is no such thing as moral phenomena, but only a moral interpretation of phenomena." What Nietzsche is saying is that judging, labeling someone as good or bad, right or wrong, isn't a reflection of reality, but a reflection of our own biases, our own fears, our own need for control. When you judge the man on the street as lazy or your cousin as naive, you're not seeing them. You're seeing your own interpretation of them, filtered through the lens of your own experiences, your own beliefs, your own insecurities. Nietzsche would say that judging is a way of asserting power, of creating a hierarchy where you're above and they're below, where you're right and they're wrong. But what if this need to judge is also what's keeping you trapped? What if every time you judge someone, you're not just putting them in a box, you're putting yourself in one too? Let's look at this through another lens. Carl Jung's concept of the shadow. Jung believed that we all have a shadow, a hidden part of ourselves that contains everything we've repressed, everything we don't want to see, our fears, our flaws, our darker impulses. When you judge someone, when you label them as selfish or immature, you're often projecting your shadow onto them. That coworker you called irresponsible, maybe they're triggering your own fear of not being in control, your own repressed desire to let go of responsibility. That friend you called shallow for posting about their vacation, maybe they're reflecting your own insecurity about not living a perfect life, your own envy that you've buried deep. Jung would say that judging others is a way of avoiding ourselves. It's easier to point the finger at someone else than to face the parts of ourselves we don't want to see. But what if this avoidance is what's keeping you stuck? What if every judgment you make is a mirror, reflecting back the shadow you've refused to confront? What if the reason you can't stop judging is because you're running from yourself? Now let's bring in a psychological perspective to understand why judging feels so automatic, so inescapable. Our brains are wired to categorize, to make sense of the world by putting things and people into boxes. This is called the categorization heuristic, a mental shortcut that helps us process information quickly. When you see someone on the street, your brain doesn't have time to analyze their entire life story, so it relies on stereotypes, assumptions, and past experiences to make a snap judgment. They're homeless, so they must be lazy. They're dressed like that, so they must be shallow. This process happens in milliseconds, often before you're even aware of it, because it's a survival mechanism. Our ancestors needed to judge quickly, friend or foe, safe or dangerous, to stay alive. But in the modern world, this mechanism often backfires. That man on the street isn't a threat, but your brain treats him like one, labeling him, dismissing him, reducing him to a stereotype. And every time you judge, your brain reinforces those neural pathways, making it easier to judge the next time and the next until it becomes a habit you can't break. What if your brain's own wiring is what's keeping you trapped in this cycle of judgment, turning every interaction into a battlefield of labels and assumptions? But it's not just biology, it's also culture, the way we're conditioned to think about the world and the people in it. We live in a society that thrives on judgment, that teaches us to see the world in binaries, good or bad, right or wrong, us or them. From a young age, we're taught to judge by our parents, who tell us who's good and who's bad, by our schools, which rank us against our peers, by our media, which glorifies some and vilifies others. Social media amplifies this, turning judgment into a sport. Scroll through your feed and you'll see people judging celebrities, politicians, strangers, friends, all in the name of likes and retweets. We're conditioned to believe that judging is not just normal, it's necessary. It's how we define ourselves, how we fit in, how we feel superior. But what if this cultural obsession with judgment is what's keeping us divided? What if it's what's keeping us from truly connecting with each other, from truly understanding each other, from truly seeing each other? What if the more we judge, the more isolated we become? So what happens when you can't stop judging? Let's start with the personal level, because this is where the impact hits hardest, where it shapes your life in ways you might not even notice. Every time you judge someone, every time you label them, you're not just seeing them through a distorted lens. You're distorting yourself. Those judgments become a filter, a barrier between you and the world, shaping how you interact, how you connect, how you love. Maybe you judge your partner for being too emotional, and over time, that judgment creates distance. You stop listening, you stop empathizing, you stop truly seeing them. Maybe you judge your friend for being too ambitious, and that judgment breeds resentment. You pull away, you criticize, you sabotage the relationship without even realizing it. Maybe you judge yourself, your body, your choices, your worth, and that judgment becomes a voice in your head, telling you you're not good enough, not smart enough, not worthy enough. Over time, these judgments build walls, walls that keep you from others, walls that keep you from yourself. How many relationships have you damaged because of a judgment you didn't even question? How many opportunities for connection have you missed because you couldn't see past your own assumptions? How many times have you judged yourself so harshly that you've forgotten how to love yourself? Let's take a closer look at how this plays out in relationships, because judgment doesn't just affect you. It affects the people around you, the ones you care about most. When you judge someone, you're not just labeling them. You're defining the way you relate to them. That uncle you called immature? Every time you see him, that judgment colors your interaction. You're less patient, less open, less willing to understand him. That cousin you called naive. Every time she shares something with you, that judgment shapes your response. You're dismissive, condescending, unable to truly celebrate her joy. Judgment creates a hierarchy, a power dynamic where you're above and they're below, where you're right and they're wrong. And over time, that dynamic erodes trust, intimacy, connection. The people you judge start to feel it. They feel unseen, unheard, unloved. They pull away, they shut down, they build their own walls in response. What if your judgments are what's keeping you from the relationships you crave? What if every time you judge someone, you're not just pushing them away? You're pushing away the chance to truly know them, to truly love them, to truly be loved? But the impact doesn't stop with you. It ripples out into society at large, affecting the way we live as a collective, the way we interact as a culture. We live in a world that's fractured by judgment, a world where we're constantly dividing ourselves into categories: rich or poor, liberal or conservative, us or them. Judgment fuels prejudice, stereotyping, discrimination. It's the root of so much of the division we see around us. Think about the way we judge entire groups of people based on their race, their religion, their sexuality, their class. These judgments aren't just thoughts. They're weapons, weapons that dehumanize, that exclude, that harm. And the more we judge, the more divided we become, the more isolated we become, the more afraid we become. Look at the rise of polarization in our world, online, in politics, in communities. We judge those who think differently, who live differently, who believe differently, and those judgments create echo chambers where we only surround ourselves with people who agree with us, where we only hear ideas that confirm our own. What if this cycle of judgment is what's tearing us apart? What if our inability to stop judging is what's keeping us from building a world where we can truly coexist, truly understand each other, truly thrive together? Let's bring neuroscience back into the picture to understand why this feels so inescapable. Because there's a biological reason why judging is so hard to stop. When you judge someone, your brain releases dopamine, the reward chemical, because judging makes you feel good. It gives you a sense of control, a sense of superiority, a sense of safety. This is why judging feels so satisfying in the moment, why it's so addictive. But that dopamine hit comes at a cost. It reinforces the neural pathways associated with judgment, making it easier to judge the next time and the next until it becomes a reflex you can't control. And here's the kicker. Judging also activates your brain's threat response. When you judge someone as different or wrong, Your amygdala, the fear center of your brain, lights up, treating them as a potential threat. This triggers a cascade of stress hormones like cortisol, putting you in a state of fight or flight, even when there's no real danger. You're not just judging, you're defending, protecting, surviving. What if your brain is literally wired to keep you judging, making every attempt to stop feel like a battle against your own nature? Now let's add another layer. Cognitive biases, the mental shortcuts our brains use to make sense of the world. One of the most powerful biases at play here is the confirmation bias, which makes us seek out information that confirms our existing beliefs. When you judge someone as lazy, you'll notice every piece of evidence that supports that judgment. The times they're late, the times they miss a deadline, while ignoring the times they work hard, the times they go above and beyond. This bias creates a distorted reality, a reality where your judgments seem true, even when they're not. Another bias at play is the fundamental attribution error, which makes us attribute others' behavior to their character rather than their circumstances. That man on the street, you judge him as lazy, not considering that he might have lost his job, his home, his family. That coworker who was late, you judge them as irresponsible, not considering that they might have been up all night with a sick child. These biases make judging feel justified, feel necessary, feel right. But what if they're trapping you in a false reality, a reality that keeps you from seeing the truth? But it's not just your brain, it's also the way society conditions us to think about judgment, the cultural narratives we've been fed since we were children. We're taught to see the world in terms of right and wrong, good and bad, worthy and unworthy. We're taught that judging is how we navigate the world, how we protect ourselves, how we define ourselves. But what if that's a lie? What if judging isn't protecting you? It's isolating you. What if the more you judge, the more you disconnect, the more you suffer? Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist philosopher, would say that this struggle with judgment is a reflection of our struggle with freedom. Sartre believed that we are radically free, but that freedom comes with a heavy burden. We're free to choose how we see others, how we treat others, how we judge others. But most of us don't want that responsibility. Judging is easy. It's a way of avoiding the uncertainty, the complexity, the vulnerability of truly seeing someone. But what if that avoidance is what's keeping you trapped? What if your freedom to judge is also your prison? Let's bring this back to a personal level with a story, because I've been where you are, and I know how heavy this burden can feel. A few years ago, I found myself caught in a cycle of judgment that I didn't even realize was happening. I had a friend, let's call her Emma, who was going through a tough time. She'd just gone through a breakup and she was struggling to find her footing. She'd call me late at night, crying, venting, asking for advice. And I'd listen, I'd support her, I'd try to be there. But deep down, I was judging her. I'd think, she's so dramatic, she needs to get over it. I'd think, she's so needy, she's always making everything about her. I never said these things out loud, but they were there, shaping the way I responded to her, the way I showed up for her. I'd be short with her, dismissive, impatient, and over time she started to pull away. She stopped calling, stopped sharing, stopped trusting me. And when I finally realized what I'd done, when I saw how my judgments had driven a wedge between us, I was devastated. I'd lost a friend, not because of what she did, but because of how I judged her. That experience forced me to confront a hard truth. My judgments weren't just thoughts. They were actions. Actions that shaped my relationships, actions that shaped my life. I realized that if I wanted to connect, if I wanted to love, if I wanted to be loved, I had to stop judging, not just others, but myself too. So how do you stop judging? How do you break free from this cycle, this prison of labels and assumptions? It starts with awareness, with noticing when you judge, with catching yourself in the act. The next time you feel a judgment rising, whether it's about a stranger, a friend, or yourself, pause, take a deep breath, and ask yourself, why am I judging right now? What am I afraid of? What part of my shadow is this judgment reflecting? What if I let this judgment go? What would I see instead? This isn't about suppressing your thoughts. It's about questioning them, challenging them, seeing them for what they are. Second, practice curiosity instead of judgment. Instead of labeling someone, get curious about them. That man on the street, what's his story? What brought him here? That coworker who was late, what's going on in their life? What are they struggling with? Curiosity opens doors, judgment closes them. Finally, let's talk about the bigger picture, because this isn't just about you. It's about all of us. If we, as individuals, can learn to stop judging, imagine what that could do for our society. Imagine a world where we don't divide ourselves into us and them, where we don't dehumanize, where we don't exclude. Imagine a world where we see each other, truly see each other, without the filter of judgment. It starts with you, with me, with each of us choosing to let go of judgment, to choose curiosity, to choose connection. So here's my challenge to you. Try to live a single day without judging anyone. Notice when you judge, question why, and choose curiosity instead. And then share your story. If this resonates with you, if you've ever felt trapped by your own judgments, let me know in the comments. Tell me about a time when your judgment hurt a relationship, or a time when you let go of judgment and saw someone in a new way. Let's start a conversation. Let's break free from this prison together. Let's learn to see each other, truly see each other, for the first time. Until next time, look at the world with curiosity, not judgment, and see what changes.